Hello and welcome everyone to our final virtual session. So thank you to everyone who's popped on. I can see people are still joining. We are expecting quite a few more, so we'll slowly start. So I just wanted to welcome everyone here today to our conference session. So this one is about programming with one of our board directors, Matt Andrews. So to begin with, I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands which we all meet this evening. For myself, I'm in northwestern Sydney, so that is the Darug land. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and welcome any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people here with us this evening. I just wanted to, this session is going to be a lot less formal than any of the other ones we've had during the past 2 weeks. So Matt's going to go through the programming guide that was emailed out in the email this morning, and he will run through from there. So there won't be a, you can pop your cameras on and we can engage and things like that. And Matt will allow for that as throughout the session as things go. As always, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat. If we can't get to them, we will send out an email tomorrow with that information for everyone. So I will mute myself, and Matt, if you want to give it maybe another minute or so. But yeah, we've got 38 on now, so quite a few people already joining us.
Thanks, Em. We'll just wait a minute or so to get some more people on. As Emily mentioned, just while we're waiting, if we may have time for certain questions during the today, just put them in the chat. But we will save a copy of the chat and answer every single question that comes through, and then we'll send those question and answers out to everyone. Slowly, everyone's coming on. Well, I think we'll get underway and then people can jump in as they jump in. So yes, for those who, and I know most people on here and most of you know me, for those who don't know myself, Matt Andrews, I've been in the sport since the under sevens, 40 something years ago, and been through the club, Zoneco president, currently on the board. So been there and done all that. Unfortunately, we couldn't be at conference to do this, where you'd be able to see me nervously walking backward and forward in front of you, going through all this. So I'm forced to sit here in the seat and you're forced to look at me and listen for the next 40 or so minutes. So I apologise for that. Today, we're just talking on competition and centre programming. We've done these a couple of times over the years at conference. We've tried to do the whole 45 minutes on programming. And as you can imagine, when there's 70 people in a room and every centre is different and questions are coming thick and fast, we don't get much achieved in that 45 minutes because there's just too many options. So we're trying to do this one a little bit differently, talk about competition days and centre programming priorities. We have that centre programming handbook, which has been sent out, which we'll talk about a bit later. So what we're trying to achieve today is highlight the importance of centre competition days / nights, something that affects every single centre, and then look at centre programming, how you can try and fix those problems yourself, if indeed you have those problems. And if you can't fix those problems, then what you can do to get help. And that's the most important thing, because many times in the last 15 years, we've done many surveys, and if you're all parents, you've seen them. Surveys go out to parents, surveys go out to ex-parents, and the main reason that comes back from people leaving our sport we can control is centre competition. The main reason parents leave this sport, and unfortunately they just leave, they rarely go to other clubs, is purely down to the centre competition being disorganised, inefficient, slow, too much wait times. We all know those complaints that parents make. And that has been around for 15 years. And those who are involved with clubs right now will know that that's just getting worse every year as parents are getting more and more impatient, more and more things on. They want to get in, get out, for the most part. And of course, then there's the people who just love it and could hang around for 4 hours if they really wanted to. So that's part of our problem. We, this is where we lose so many, and we're talking 15,000 people a year leave the sport for various reasons. And if we could save 10% of them every year from leaving, then that's a big plus to our registrations and to our clubs. And if you're a club that keeps its regos or goes up slowly, then you're doing most things right. But there are a lot of clubs out there that are losing numbers and losing lots of regos, and they just don't do anything about it or can't do anything about it. So we're hoping to fix some of those problems today. So what we're just going to quickly talk about is the importance of getting it right, which we've just discussed, is that this is what keeps people happy. And as I say to clubs when I visit them, no one cares that your committee meetings go for an hour and a half or 3 hours. The parents don't care. It doesn't affect them. They only care about getting in there, doing some events, not sitting around waiting for 45 minutes for a track event and then going home. That's all they care about. And that's what we have to deal with as best as possible. It's not easy. And one other thing that obviously we all know is that there's no right or wrong answer to this that we're trying to talk about tonight, because what works at one club or what works at Hornsby, I can see here, or what works out at Parks is two different things. But most of the practical things on comp day are the same for every club, which is where we're going to focus on a bit on comp day. And then we'll get to this programming side, which most people just shake their head, run away, scream, just don't want to do it or can't do it. It is, I say to people, the most difficult part of any club is getting their program right. But when you get it right and then you adjust it every year, then it stays right, usually. It's when you have a program that works and then clubs don't change it and they just use it. So we've used it for the last 10 years. That's terrific, but things have changed in the last 10 years. So the importance of getting program and comp day right. Sorry, that's it. We just we talked about that. One of the highlights I want to do is for the last 15 years, I've been helping centres with their programs. A country centre 2 years ago that had been losing a considerable number of regos for a country centre. So it's gone from 110 down to 40. And they were just at a loss. The problem in country and metro is same, but there's a lot of difference in that many country centres are run by 3 people and they're trying to do everything. And it's essentially reactive. There's no proactive work. But when I went in and we went through, redid their program, fixed their comp day processes, what I saw after 3 or 4 weeks of competition was their rego numbers suddenly shot back up, because all those people that have walked away, and of course people are happy to complain about your club to everyone they can talk to, we're hearing from people who were there this year that things had improved, it was going so well. So suddenly their numbers grew back, and then the following year they had record numbers. And it's hard work, but the hard work is short term, and then it pays off for a number of reasons, of which we'll go through. So that's why it's so important to get comp days right. And programming is part of that, but it's not the whole thing. Competition day priorities, and this is what I tell everyone, is that you need to look organised on your comp day or night. I'll keep saying comp day because that's what I'm used to, but you all know what I mean. You need to look organised. And we all know that it's usually a chaotic, disorganised mess. It's the old duck theory, that you just need to look like everything's going to plan, even if it's turning pear-shaped. That looking organised flows into one other important thing which every centre suffers from, and that is getting new committee members. If you think to being a parent who's not on the committee and you're seeing that committee say, we need you to join or we need people to join, and every time they come to comp, they see 3 or 4 committee members running around like chooks with their head cut off, probably for legitimate reasons, but if that's what they see, then why would they put their hand up to join your committee? So the more committee you have, the more less work each person has to do, the more organised you are. It's a whole catch-22 again. So as I say to clubs, you need to look organised at comp days for that 45 minutes flying. Have your committee shirts on, very important that people know who's in charge and who's doing things. And as I say, look organised. The other one that I notice when I go to clubs, one of the biggest problems is clubs don't start on time. If you say it's 5 p.m. and you start at 5:20, we all know what that means. And that means that parents will come as late as they can. So if you always start at 5:15, well, then they rock up at 5:15. And then it's so on and so on. If you say you're starting at 5 or 6 or 8 a.m., then start on time, even if you're not ready. But start, you're on time, get your muster. And these are 2 of the most important things for comp days. I tell them, look organised, start on time, because it really is frustrating. And sometimes it can't be helped. The other one that we are all affected by at some point is that something's gone wrong or there's an issue, a drama, timing solutions, starting guns, doesn't matter. Things go wrong and there's a drama and there's a reason why you have to cancel an event, start late or something. Don't try to cover up or hide problems that are definitely going to affect your program. When you have your muster, just explain to them, sorry, today we can't do this. We're going to be 15 minutes late just because of this, or whatever the problem is. Explain it to parents before. Don't try to hide it and cover it up, because it just looks like, that's just another annoyance to parents. So I think everyone knows what I mean by that. One thing that's been lovely, and many clubs have a competition manager or a track and field manager or something. That's a luxury for clubs with plenty of committee or someone who loves to do it. Not a luxury for every club, but someone needs to be in charge of your competition. President, track manager, competition manager, whatever you want to call it, whoever it is, they are responsible for the program. They can't be running around putting out equipment 1 minute before it starts, and then they've got to run back and make sure the folders are out, all these things that should already be done. And so that person needs to be meeting and greeting, if you like. Know that the folders are ready, everything's ready, get the muster underway on time, or whoever does that. But this person's job is to make sure the program that you put out there, pardon me, is being followed. Or if there is a drama or a problem because something's underwater or whatever the case may be, that they fix it. Don't just let programs go and people, there's a group sitting over on the far field, especially in country towns where there's 100, 200, 300 metres away, sitting there for 40 minutes waiting because someone's jumped in the wrong venue or someone's done this. And then they fix the problem. You keep an eye on the program. If there's a delay, if someone's done the wrong thing, or just fix it. People appreciate that. People don't mind waiting or handling a delay if they've explained what's gone wrong. So once again, it comes back to information and communication. Communicate, keep on top of everything, make sure everything's going to your program, and that's many of the problems that occur on comp nights out of the way. They're very simple things. One of the problems I've noticed in many clubs that struggle, and we all have these problems, is the drop and runs. I went to a country club 2 years ago, and first thing I do when I go to a club is just watch the drop off, and I saw 6s and 7s being dropped off and driven off, and kids left there on their own. That's unacceptable, for any reason. All athletes at our competition need to be supervised, and the committee are not the supervisors. A parent or someone is responsible for that child. We all know those children, because when the rain comes and we cancel comp and 200 people scatter, then there's a heap of kids just stand there because their parents weren't even there, or no one's got responsible for them. One of the problems of this is generally those kids tend to be the, how can I say, sometimes the biggest pains in the backside. And so what you do have is the parents who are taking the groups around. And sometimes, of course, we know you've got 12, 20, some clubs more, 10-year-old boys especially in a group, and two poor parents taking them around. And I know that some clubs actually do this as a result of keeping people filled. That's fine because the parents are somewhere. And those kids are just absolute rat bags, some of them, and their parents aren't there. What happens is the good parents who continually come, take the groups around, they get driven nuts and stop coming because they're too busy looking after everyone else's children. So you actually lose the good parents, and the parents who drop and run do what they don't care. So straight up at the start of the year, it's very important for centres to come down hard, lay the law down and say all kids must be supervised by someone. Now, a parent may have a couple of their friends' kids there or whatever, who cares? But someone's responsible for them. And yes, that may irritate some of the parents who love to drop and run. And some of the feedback I get from clubs when I mention this is, oh, we'll lose some kids. Okay, what are you losing? You're losing some kids, but you're not losing any parents because they're never there. And you're saving yourself from losing the good families, if I want to look at it in that respect. So that's something to look at. And again, it's short-term pain, long-term gain, because you crack down hard, you lay down the rules, and parents work with it. And then eventually you fix that culture. And it's a culture that is a problem. It doesn't take very long to ruin a culture, but it takes an awful long time to turn it around. And it means being tough, but it does mean better things down the track. And as I said, not necessarily always the case for some areas, but these are just the simple things on comp days and laying down the laws that benefit your club moving forward before we even get to the program part. The program part is a small part of the problems. So just on a program, you got this set of programming guide, which we handed out to everyone. And I've been using this for about 10 years with centres and helping centres with their program. We all know some of the biggest problems with the program is people waiting around. I mean, that is sitting around for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Some people sit around for 45 an hour for an event. That's just going to irritate everyone. I fixed a program for a club a number of years ago. When I looked at their program, I just couldn't believe that one of their 3 weeks, this particular age group, which contained 30 under 10 boys, so just think about taking that group around, the only events for one of their weeks were 4 track events. There was no field events on that program for that week. 4 track events, a total of which would have been 7 minutes of competing for that 3-hour comp. The rest of the time was waiting. Now, all the power to those parents that took those 30 under 10 boys around that week. But that's crazy. That's also just not how we should be running a program. So the guide that we've given you is sort of step by step. It should be pretty easy to understand. I call it a Sudoku because that's what it is. The options that some clubs look at is the 2 and the 3 week program as the main ones. And some have some weird and wonderful longer than that. I get into that. Some centres love their 2-week program and it worked perfectly for them. Excellent. The problem with a 2-week program for the most centres who struggle with running their comp is that it's inflexible. You have to run all those events over the 2 weeks and you just have no flexibility, basically. They've just got to all be done. And there's a lot of events, obviously, for especially the older groups. A 3-week program gives you more flexibility to juggle the events around to fit the Sudoku. And it means the events that, let's be honest, the majority of kids are not interested in. The 3K, the walks, if you do them, 1,500, etc. The majority of kids have no interest in those events. So doing them once every 3 weeks and maybe doing the 100 twice or long jump twice or the 200 twice and actually do events that kids want to do. Because, I mean, that's in the end, what we're doing is doing what kids like to do. They like to do the small races. They like to run in the sand, like to throw the discus or the javelin or whatever you want to do. But the other events, the speciality events, there are a lot, there's something that like it, but the majority don't. And that's what we're trying to keep happy. So I prefer a 3 program. I always suggest clubs to do it. It means you can do 2 track and 2 field events for every group every week, make it all fit, and that's the perfect couple of hour program or an hour and a half program for everyone. As I said, not for everyone. In there, I talk about running it like a carnival. The benefits of that, and I see many clubs do this where they run basically the 4 events as 4 separate rotations. So you might go long jump first, and then the next rotation is the 100. And everybody, or half the club, or hundreds of kids are lining up for the 100 or for the 200 or whatever, waiting to have their race sitting there. Now that's fine if it's a small group and it's a small weight, and some people just enjoy that. But that's a lot of waiting around. How I suggest clubs run a program is you have basically a carnival. You have 2 rotations, the first field event, the second field event. And if you go through this program, you'll notice what I'm saying about that. Field event 1 and 2, they go to their first field event. Every single child is doing a field event when that comp starts. Every single one, straight to a field event. They're doing something. Some clubs run 1 track at a time. Some clubs can run 2. Some can actually run 3 different things at once, which is awesome to them. And then what I suggest is you just call groups to that track event, like we would at a carnival. So if you're running the 100s and you're ready for the 6s, call the 6s, then call the 7s, then call the 8s, et cetera, et cetera. Do their races, straight back to their field event, keep competing. If your program's planned well and your groups are roughly of this approximate age, which we'll get through in a minute, I mean size, then approximately 45 minutes or an hour later, depending on the size of your groups, they'll all just jumble around musical chairs off to their second field event, and we go again. And they get called for their second or third track event, however you run. And then basically when they get the end of their field events, or depending if you're an older group and you've got a 3,000 to do or something, they're done. There's been no waiting other than potentially a couple of minutes to rotate between field events. And the reality is that every club I've done this for, every club that's done this, it works fine in general. So that's the suggestion to clubs, to run it like this. There's no, force to do it. Some clubs like their 2-week program, and that's great. If clubs' program are working fine, awesome. When I talk about the group size, if your venue has 4 long jumps and 2 discus and 2 shot puts and a javelin area, then you've got your 9 venues or your 10 venues or your 11 venues that you can use at any one time. If that means you've got 11 venues, then you try to aim for 11 groups, if that makes sense, if you can. And we all merge groups, especially the older ones, things like that. We all merge different groups. So if you can merge them into groups of 20 or 25 or 15, or however works best for your age groups, and you have your 10, 9, 6, 15 groups, depending on your club and your venues, then they're all going to do events at roughly the same time, and then you can work that program to that. So that's what we mean by trying to even out the groups. 6 girls, 6 boys, 7 girls, 7 boys, 8 girls and boys, if it all works out that way. And of course, yes, that changes every year, hence a minor adjustment to the groups, jiggle your program, and life is a lot more easier and less waiting around. So that's the gist of what we do with that type of program. Many of the clubs are introducing novelty events, if you like. One of the ones I find a lot of clubs enjoy, or kids enjoy, obviously the younger ones, is the Vortex. I know many clubs now do Vortex, and obviously we've got the Javelin. Under 10s do Turbo Jav. So your 6s, 7s, 8s and 9s can do Vortex. It's obviously not a zone event, but you can run it as a normal event. You can have a club record. All it requires is just a line marked on the grass somewhere with a throwing sector like a javelin. Run it however you want. And that's an extra venue that you have at your disposal. And kids love the Vortex. Let's just say under 6 and 7s, not such big fans of the shot put. So perhaps you can run the shot put once in the 3-week rotation, a couple of long jumps, a couple of discuses, and a Vortex. Like I said, have a record and use that event as a filler in the program. So these are all options that you can do that, and I see all of you saying that, yeah, we're using a rubber hammer. Perfect. You can make up novelty events that are, however you run them at your club to fill your program. Or if you have 12 age groups or 12 groups and only 11 venues, and you cannot do what we just talked about, then have a skills area or a skills session or something, or a coach for that session, just teaching them some basics for that rotation. So at least they're doing something for 30 or 40 minutes, not sitting around just waiting for your group. So these are all little things that you can do. And it doesn't matter whether you have 20 in your club or 200 or 500. There's a number of different ways you can do it. And actually, I find the smaller the club, the country clubs will know that are on here, that it is hard to run a program for 40 kids. And I've got a few programs here for 50 kids where it's split into 4 groups of 15 or something like that. And you've got this big split of ages where you might have under 6s is usually a big group because there's always a lot of younger kids. You might then have the 7s to 9s and maybe, or 9s and 10s, and then 11s all the way through for like 10 kids. Programming for country centres is a nightmare, but it can be done. And, potentially where there's a split or a different event, they can do different things. So plenty of options in that respect. And what we saw last year, and probably what some centres will be doing soon, is this split or staggered start. It was forced upon a lot of centres last year because of the COVID restrictions and numbers. The feedback from a number of centres is that they really enjoyed it for obvious reasons, is that it's staggering that start time, only having 200 kids or 150 kids here. The 6 and 7s sort of finish and go, and then your 10s, 11s, or 12s, depending on your split, have arrived. So suddenly, instead of having to spread out 300 kids across your venues, you're only having to worry about 200 because they've got this staggered start. And as I said, many centres have indicated they're going to stick with that regardless. And that's a great way to do it because, especially if you staggering your older kids, because the older kids can, if they can get out of bed, if you're a Saturday morning club, come there and help with the tops or help with the 6s and 7s or officiate in that first hour. And that means they're learning officiating as well. So there's really good benefits to doing it that way. So as I said, the 3-week program gives you more flexibility, and that is one of the ways that we can get about it. I always tell the clubs to look at discus as a way of working out what your club can handle, because every child in your club does the discus. It's not the slowest event. We all know high jump. High jump's a bit of a nightmare to do. But I always roughly say it takes approximately an hour to do 20 kids. It doesn't. It takes a bit less usually, but it just depends on the age groups. Depends on your parents, depends on the officials. So I always work on the hour for 20 kids. So if you total up how many kids you have and divide it by 20, then you're left with that many groups. However many discus, you have in your venue. Some people have the 2, some have 2 plus a discus, the portable cage for 6 and 7s. That reduces the amount of hours that you need to compete to get through discus. So if you need to compete for 9 hours to get through discus, then a 3-week comp is 3 weeks of 3 is perfect. So that's always a good guide to work out roughly what you would need to do. When it comes to filling in this program, and we'll just talk about that in a minute, that's the part I always tell clubs to do. Don't worry about the track part. The track's easy to do. I mean, your track program most clubs have now works usually, the spread over the 2 or 3 weeks. You can add that in later. I always say when you're doing a program and you've worked your groups out and you've got this many venues and you want to do it as we've got in this program in some form, start with the difficult ones like javelin, where you've got usually one. Lucky if you've got more, but usually if you've got one. High jump, you may only have the 2 options to use, whether it's scissor or whatever, and your triple jump options if you do it. Try and fill that little piece of the puzzle first, and then work long jump and other things around it. Shot put is a great one. I always leave that last. Most people have 2 shot puts, concrete, but you know, a circle marked in the grass and a board down, there's your 3rd shot put for 6s or for tots to use the rubber one or whatever you want to do. These are all things that you can add, or centres can add to fix their program. So once you sort of fill the little Sudoku and fill in the spots, it is a bit of a headache if it's not your thing, but if you like data entry or you're a bit of a puzzle person, I'm not going to say it's enjoyable, but it's but I can usually do a program for a centre in about 30 minutes to 60 minutes, but that's me, and I'm quite crazy about that. So that's just the programming part. What we want to try and get out to centres is use this program, or try to use this program in some way, if you want to, or you have an issue with your program, to fix the problem you have. And so we're hoping that centres, and that's the biggest problem, every time we've shown a centre what to do, 2 years later, everyone, especially in this current era where we rotate so much people, they're gone, no one knows what to do, the program falls into a heap again. So we're trying to make centres a bit more self-sufficient in use this to get what works. And if it works, fantastic. Then the next year, you've got a program. You just have to adjust it for the change in regos, change in age groups, and the usual change in events every 2 years we seem to get. And then just keep modifying that program and work. What we're saying to centres is please give that a go. If centres are struggling or can't do it, or it's just too hard, we'd rather they just not go, oh, well, or we'll just use what we did last year, which was the same one we used 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Actually ask for help. And by that, we mean contact the office. And at the back of that program, there's actually obviously contact details for the development officers in all the different areas. But what we want the centres to do is like ask for help, and then we will provide that assistance to the centres, because in the end, and I keep saying this all the time, that as a sport, we attract so many new people every year into this sport, so many. But we lose so many. And some of it we can't help, just kids just not going to be interested or whatever else. But we lose so many because centres, unfortunately, for a number of reasons, and you can't blame centres because people are overwhelmed. There's 3 people running a centre. It's hard work. We all know it. We've all been there. But they're shedding numbers, and you can look at a club's regos and they drop 50 regos a year for the last 3 years, and no one seems to ask why. And 90% chance is it's because of your comp day, whether it's the comp day or the program or a combination of both, it's that reason. And so we want to fix that, and we want every centre to fix it. And if they can't fix it, then ask for help and we'll help, because that's what we're here to do. And that's what the staff are here to do, and someone will help these centres. So that's one of the important parts. Christine, yeah, the centre programming guide, Little A's emailed out this morning to everyone here. So just check your email, but this will be available to every centre, obviously. So, yeah. Just on that, we always get asked every year about some samples and sample programs. just come up for 10 years. It's impossible to have sample programs because some centres don't do javelin, some centres don't do walks, some centres don't do this, some centres don't do 3K. Some centres have 2 long jumps. Some lucky centres have 6. Some have many high jumps. Some have many discus cages, etc. So standard programs, just impossible because obviously they don't work. In the back of that program, there are samples that I've shown for, I think, 150 athletes, 75 athletes, whatever. I've got programs for 50 athletes, 300, 400, 200, etc., and 2-week programs. So we do have some samples if people want. They want to ask for some samples just to look at that would suit their club, and then you could potentially adjust it. And we're happy to provide the Word documents for 2 and 3 programs that are already being done for 50, 75, 100, 50, 200, etc. And then you can just wiggle with that if you want. There's no problem at all. But like we said, we want to help. And I know there's plenty of zone codes on here. If we can stress this out to the clubs to just ask for assistance. Some people may have looked through this program already. Like I said, it's fairly simple and step by step. There's no point me reading through it or any of that. So does anyone have any questions about that they don't understand in that document? That maybe, because sometimes when I type things, it's, I understand it, so it makes sense to me, but it might not make sense to other people.
Sorry, can I just ask, did that go out with the email today?
Yes, so that centre programming, which cover here.
I don't seem to have it, that's all.
I had the cover here somewhere. But yes, that went out this morning in an email. But we'll make sure everyone gets a copy of it again.
Fine, I've just forwarded it to Christine, but I'll just forward the same email to you right now as well.
Thanks, Emily.
Yeah, so it should be in there. Maybe check spam if it's not there. But so everyone here has it. It will go out to everyone as well as everything else. So it's a fairly simple step-by-step. I'm not going to say programming for dummies because it's just that it is a hard program or process, but it is step-by-step and just highlights how we run the program in terms of et cetera, and how to do it.
Matt, it's Bruce. I didn't get it either. Emily, could you send it to me using my Bruce at Bruce B. Cox at me?
It's in the chat now, Bruce.
Okay. So yeah, so some Alice from Hornsby's posted in the chat. So if you open the chat, you can click on the link.
Great.
That'll open it too. But it'll all come out. And some of you who have dealt with me in the last 10 years have probably seen it. It's updated again because of the events and everything keeps changing. I have to keep updating. So, but in some of the regional centres that we've used it to, we've seen red clubs turn around, increase their regos and increasing other things. So it does work. As I said, many of you here, there's some centres here I know who have really well run programs and really well run competition. And so, excellent. And always happy to get feedback. So if some of the centres here who know their program works well and got some suggestions and ideas that can be a help for other centre, please forward that into the office because, we can make additions and extras onto this because we want this to be a document that works for everyone that need it and that can be used constantly. So if you've got suggestions or things that aren't in there, please send them through to the office so that we can look at getting them in there for all the centres. Because, but yeah, so.
Matt, can I just share my experience from last year? Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Like we had over 600 athletes last year, so we were forced to run 2 sessions. It was the first time, and I noticed that there's some comments in there just in regards to, what happens if the parents have two kids in different sessions. We have to remember we made a decision at Hills that it's not about the parents, it's about the kids. And, you know, it was tough, but the overwhelming feedback at the end of our season, we went back and we did a survey where we got over a 35% response rate, which was awesome. Where people actually liked the split sessions because it actually did reduce the amount of time that people had between events.
Absolutely.
So, you know, and our policy was always like, oh, well, your recovery time is always when you're moving between the events. But we did get some feedback going, hey guys, we're now going to events so quick that we don't have any time for recovery. So, you know, there's always going to be those issues, and it is a fine line. But the biggest thing that I did, and I've been doing this job as the track and field coordinator for Hills for the last 3 years, it's about planning. That's all it is. And I use Excel and I do all that sort of stuff, and I jiggle my program around in the first 4 to 6 weeks, and then we're usually set all the way through. So that's probably the biggest tip for anyone who's never done this before, is just about planning your session, understanding what your age groups are consisted of. So how many athletes are in each age group. I mean, we had last year in our under-8 boys, we had 54 athletes. So, you know, it's a massive amount to try and coordinate. And Simon, our age coordinator for that age group, was just totally overwhelmed, but we try to get him through. But that's probably the best thing that I could say in regards to that.
Thanks for that, John. And I'm glad you just made a point, because I forgot to mention that one of the things that I tell every club to do, and is what we used to do, for those who don't know, I was involved in the Glenbrook Club for 40 years, is we tell everyone at the first week, this is our program for the first 3 weeks. And of course, we all know that regos change even from the first week to the second to the third week. So that this is our program, our draft program. We run it through the first 3 weeks, and then it'll probably change and make some minor changes after that first rotation where you've seen what hasn't worked. Regos have changed. You might have to split a group because suddenly you've got 50 kids in it. Or whatever the reason, you make the changes, redo the program and set it. So that's an important thing. But again, as we keep saying, and as John just said, it's all about communication, planning, communication, be organised, look organised, as I've gone right back to the start. Look organised even if you're not. Start on time. Keep an eye on what's happening. Make sure things are happening and fix things that need to be fixed. It's hard work, but once you get it working, then life is so much easier. And then the following year, you just have to tweak it, age groups, whatever. So that's basically the gist of it all. As I said, normally we would go through the whole programming guide and we achieve nothing. So I want to focus more on competition day and programming, competition day and dealing with the parents these days, and more to do with how you can deal with this problem. As I said, we want clubs to try and fix these problems themselves for obvious reasons. But if you can't, what we really want, I mean, we're pleading with some centres, and because we go to centres and we go, look, there's something wrong with your centre. You're losing 100 regos. What's wrong? And the first answer will be nothing. And they may believe that because you don't see things go bad over a period of time. So if you're shedding regos, then there is a problem. There's a problem. So what we're asking centres is, please ask for help, because there's no embarrassment because you've got a problem or you can't get a program or you've got this or whatever the problem is at your club. We're just asking centres to actually ask for help from the office. We have the staff. We have people in our sport, whether they're board, directors, zone codes, presidents, whatever, who can help other centres and are willing to. So the message out of all this is just try and fix your problem. But if you can't, let us know and we'll try and help you out. Is there any other issues?
Craig, can you just comment, Matt, I'm sorry, could you just comment on the relative merits of 2 versus 3 weekly programs as you said?
Yeah, so for me, the main difference is that a 2-week program is pretty inflexible. I mean, you have to do all the events, if that's 13 events for the older age groups, in those 2 weeks. So there's no moving things around. It's 6 one week, 7 the other, or whatever. And obviously the younger groups less. the advantage of the 2-week program is you do those events more during a year. That's obvious. But trying to run that many events every week means that your program's longer. Not everyone wants to be at pro competition for 4 hours on a Friday. And I know plenty of centres here run a 2-week program much quicker than that, which is fantastic, but a lot don't. And it takes 3 to 3.5 hours, which is just way too long for competition on a night time. So that the only disadvantage, the big disadvantage of a 2-week program is there's no flexibility to move anything or spread things out. And every event is done equal amount of times, whether it's a 3K, 100 metres, whatever. We know for a long period of time at conferences when we talk to other clubs, most kids are not interested in those events. Most kids do not want to do the walks if you actually run them. Most kids do not like the 3K, nor the 1500, nor a number of events, and that's their choice. What we say is, what we're trying to run is put out a sport or entertainment for kids and doing things they enjoy, which is having fun, running 100 metres, long jump, novelty events, bit of social, whatever else. So a 3-week program gives you flexibility to move events. So if you can't fit your high jump in this week because of you've already got too many groups doing high jump, you can move it to week 2 or you can move it to week 3. So you've got this ability to move events around in the jigsaw, and then you can just do the 2 track and 2 field for every group every week. Except for the older age groups, say you have to do an extra one, the 3K or something. But so that just gives you flexibility for the 3-week program, 1, to move events around your program to work, and 2, your program's quicker. It's obviously quicker because you're running less events each week. And the downside to the 3-week, of course, is that you do those events less times in a year. But depends on what your kids in your club want, because in the end, it shouldn't be what we want or we think a Little Aids club should be run like. It comes down to what the kids in your club like, generally, not can keep everyone happy. So, yeah. I love with the walks. How do centres police the walking and not jogging? Well, I want to say most clubs, a lot of clubs don't do the walks. Most regional clubs don't do them because they can't judge them or train or coach for them, so they just don't do walks at all. The centres that do the walk, I think, are generally pretty strict, but I know some centres just do it a bit as a fun event. So, yeah, I'm not sure what most clubs that run the walks properly are pretty strict, I think, on the judging. What a lot of clubs do with the 3K, there's a couple of comments about the 3K. I know we used to do it at Glenbrook and a lot of other clubs do it, is if your comp starts at 8:30, one of the 3 weeks, whatever it is, program C, whatever you want to call it, the 3K is on at 8:15 a.m. So just the 5, 6, 10, 20 kids, whatever that want to do the 3K, do it at 8:15. So they're doing their 3K while muster's on. And then at 8:30, everyone goes off their first event. That's usually a good way. And if you're certainly if you're a morning club, it means it's not being done in the heat. So that's one way to just do it. Many clubs do that. Even some of the walks they run after comp or pre-comp just to get it out of the way, because there's potentially for them only a handful of kids maybe do it. Yeah, a lot of clubs do not do the walks. There's a lot of clubs that don't do javelin just because it's not safe. A lot of clubs don't do the 300 hurdles because the majority of the 14s or 14s up just aren't interested. Some clubs, the 14s up, just run the 200 because that's what they prefer. If they want to run longer hurdles, they're probably doing them at ANSW or other events. But that's just a lot of the events and what you run comes down again, as I said, to what works at your club and what works best for your area, your club, because no two clubs are the same. And that's the problem with this programming, is that everyone has their own thing. So as I said, if you've got suggestions or programming suggestions or competition day things that works at your club, send it to the office, because we'd love to pad out this program with more suggestions and everything else, so that it is a one-stop shop for all the clubs. So yeah, well, that's the 1500 and 3K, especially the 3K. Usually you get, I harp back on Glenbrook because it's what I know. 330 kids, and you get 10 doing the 3K. 1500, there's usually 60 that do 3K, 1500, because the reality is that the majority of kids are just not interested in these events. They're there for fun. Hence the advantage of the 3 program. You can do the 1500 once, 3 weeks. You can do the 3K once every 3 weeks, the walks once every 3 weeks, but you can do the hundreds twice, or you can do the 200s twice, because that's what kids want to do. And then the one throwback that people throw from that is, yeah, but what about trophies and points, and the sprinters get more points and all that sort of garbage? The majority of people don't actually care about that sort of thing. Parents do. I find a lot of clubs do, but most kids don't. They just actually want to turn up, jump in the sandpit, run some races, throw something around, chat, have fun, and go home. And 1500, 3Ks, doing that every 2 weeks, you know, things like that, they're just not interested. And that's what we're supposed to be trying to do here, is put together a competition or a program or a sport that actually kids want to do these days, not necessarily what we think they want to do. So yeah, running it last or first, the 3K is one of the best options. So we're at a couple of minutes to go. We don't want to drag everyone on or not. We're missing Olympics, I get it. So that's about all from me. I hope there's been some things in there that make sense. Tried to focus a bit more on the competition day aspect to get that part that the people see right. And as I said, if you know other centres or a Zoneco, please encourage them to watch the video of this or read the notes of the program. And if you have a centre in your zone that you know, and the Zoneco is all on here, and they've all got at least one, suggest to them to speak to the office so we can actually try and fix it, because it's, like I said, if we can all reduce the amount of kids leaving our sport, then we'll be going up in regos every year, which would be fantastic. So thanks to everyone. Thanks, Emily. As I said, any questions we didn't answer, which there's a lot, we will be, Christine, I think Emily can answer that one. There we go. Emily's just posted the email for any ideas or questions. We'll copy this chat. We will answer every single question and then get that out to everyone, the answers, questions, and everything on here. So as I said, I hope there's been something in there for everyone at least. And best of luck. And if you're in Sydney, I hope you're doing well in your lockdown for the next few weeks. So, so thank you to everyone. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks everyone for coming along tonight. And I see quite a few people have been on to quite a few of our sessions throughout the past 2 weeks. So thank you, everyone, and hope you all stay safe.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.